I met him through an online dating site called Genuine Widowed Singles, though it seems that he was in a different dating site, Plenty More Fish, The Silver Pond, some of the internet dating sites. It appears, share your data. His photograph was not the most flattering, but he was very friendly and chatty. He was separated, a father of 3 and a sergeant in the RAF, a reservist as he had had an eye injury which meant he was no longer deployable. We met in a local pub on a Tuesday, and what was meant to be a quick drink turned into a meal, and we talked until the pub closed. He sent me a message through the dating site after I got home and texted me a few times over the next few days as I had to go to London for work. He was checking I'd arrived safely and was very attentive and kind in his messages. He came to meet me for a quick drink after work on the Friday, just a few days later in his uniform, as I'd never been close to a man in uniform. I felt a little intimidated by the uniform, but we sat and chatted warmly and clicked. He seemed to like doing a lot of the things I did. We arranged to have a third date on the Sunday, a trip to the cinema, which he had to call off. Then we rescheduled it for the Tuesday. That date happened and we sat in the back row, kissing and getting quite passionate. He came back to mine for a coffee and more passion in my kitchen. I wasn't ready for full intimacy and he respected that and left with difficulty. He told me he was separated, that his wife had moved out 6 months ago. He'd been married for 23 years, but since his detached retina and being medically retired from the RAF 2.5 years ago, they just didn't get on anymore. The marriage had been a good one until then, but it was now loveless, but they hadn't really moved on from the separation, they were just stuck. He was looking after the 3 children aged 21, 17 and 13. I believed him, he seemed so genuine. I had been widowed 2.5 years earlier, my husband had cancer for 5 years, our marriage was a happy one, we'd had 17 years together. I told him that I was ready for a new relationship. We all had passed at our age, he was 50, I was 51, and that he was not put off by me being a widow. Our 4th date he came to my house and we had food and watched comic relief together. We got quite passionate, but we didn't have intercourse as he was unable to. Nerves, he said. It was after about a month we did that, and from then on sex was a big part of our relationship. In fact, the relationship moved very quickly. He kept in constant contact with me by Viber, text and FB. He told me he loved me after 4 weeks. He'd never felt this way about anyone. He wanted to be with me all the time. There'd been no one else when he was married and no one since he and his wife started to drift apart. He moved out of his marital home 7 weeks after we met. He was going to rent somewhere and I helped him to look for somewhere his kids could come and stay with him. In the end, he decided to rent a room in the officer's mess whilst he decided what to do. He started to spend more and more time at my place. He met my son and formed a lovely relationship with him. He told me he wanted to get married one day. He wanted to get me a ring. I said it was too soon, he wasn't even divorced and I wouldn't commit myself to him until he was divorced. I refused to be the other woman. A few red flags came up. It was unclear whether his wife had moved out. They were in separate rooms for a long time, he told me. Then it slipped out that he'd had a couple of dates with other women online before me. I met his children and their relationship was strained. The eldest son was on the dole and just a drifter, smoking pot and very nervous. He told me his son had been abused by a group of older boys when he was young and that had only come out in the last few years, and the whole family had had counseling. His daughter, who was 13, was regularly getting drunk and he allowed her to smoke in my garden when they came to my house for the first time. I challenged him about her behavior afterwards. He blamed the mother. She allowed this and bought the older children cigarettes to help them cope with stress, which they were sharing with their younger sister. I told him that next time they visited I would not allow his daughter to smoke, that it was illegal and disrespectful to her parents to think it was okay to do it openly. The children didn't visit after that and he rarely saw them as he was spending more and more time with me. I wouldn't let him move in fully as he wasn't divorced and I was receiving a widowed parent's allowance, which I would lose if we cohabited. We saw each other most nights apart from the night he coached rugby in his hometown and he stayed in his room in the mess. He got fully involved in my life very quickly, meeting my family and friends, getting involved with the charity I worked for. Everyone thought he was wonderful as he was making me so happy. I found going to the mess and the RAF life really exciting, going to a military parade and a ball and Armed Forces Day. I was madly in love with this man. We went on holiday to Cornwall and stayed in the mess there, and then for his birthday I paid for an apartment in France close to a very close friend of mine. We had a wonderful holiday, it was like a honeymoon. He had been trying to get a loan to buy a car before we left, but had been turned down due to a poor credit history. He also didn't have a credit card, which made hiring a car in France for him to be the main driver a bit tricky. He hinted at me being a guarantor for the car loan. I said I didn't have that kind of money, but was trying to help him get his credit rating sorted. When that happened, I realized now this was another red flag. After the holiday, I was really low as it was back to reality. His divorce was not progressing, and I didn't want to wait anymore for him to move in fully. We'd been together 7 months by then. I noticed a shift in his behavior though. Just before the holiday he started to see his daughter most Tuesdays, stayed at the mess Tuesdays and Thursdays. He was going to have to go away on an RAF exercise over a weekend. He would spend a lot of time in the loo with his phone. I started questioning him about his behavior. He said it was just post-holiday blues. He wasn't as helpful around the house. I had a severe water infection and what I thought was thrush whilst we were away, and I wasn't getting better. He was showing me something in his phone, and a missed call from a woman I hadn't heard of showed up. I asked who she was, and he told me it was his team manager at the rugby club. I knew her name though, and asked why he was lying. He then made up a story about her being a work colleague. He was trying to help patch up an argument with another colleague. He'd lied because he felt angry with me as I seemed to be watching him all the time. I half believed him, but later I couldn't sleep and told him I thought he was lying and that I thought he needed time to be single and should take his things and leave. He'd come straight from his long marriage to me, and I thought he needed time to be single. I'd been cheated on by my first husband, not my late second husband, and I would find out if that's what he was doing. He became hysterical, crying, saying, "I can't believe you'd think that. I love you. I want to be with you forever, blah blah blah." I believed him that night. The next day the doctor suggested I get tested for STDs as my infection wasn't getting better. The STD doctor thought I had chlamydia and gave me antibiotics. I tracked down the woman on Facebook and Google and sent her a message asking for the truth. I found another inbox on Facebook that I didn't know was there, and there was a message from another woman telling me to be careful as the man I loved was on online dating sites and was a liar and a two-timer and a cheat. I ended up going to the house of the woman on his home, and she admitted that she was dating my boyfriend and had been for about a month. She wouldn't tell me exactly how long. He was desperately trying to make me believe that these two women were stalkers from the dating site, angry that he had told them he was in a relationship and not interested. Yeah, right. I threw him out 4 months ago. I've blocked him on my phone and on FB. The woman I went to see changed her FB status to in a relationship 9 days after I went to see her. Who knows what he's told her about me? I did a lot of research after we split, as it was such a shock to find out that he was an online predator, as our relationship seemed so perfect. I have tried so hard to have no contact. I was checking his Twitter feed though, and he kept tweeting things about the charity I work for and bought tickets to an event I was singing at with my choir 5 weeks after our split. He turned up with his new girlfriend. I didn't go anywhere near him. He then started tweeting about another event I was singing at, so I emailed him and asked him to find another charity to be involved with and not to go to any events he knew I'd be at. He only got involved in my charity because of our relationship. He stopped tweeting about my charity, and I've blocked him on Twitter too. I joined a dating site at the end of December, and he catfished me on that, claiming to be someone else with a whole fake life. I asked that person to email me as my subscription was ending. He sent me a message with an email account he'd set up, but his first email to me showed that the email address was on a device owned by him, so he was caught out. I sent him an email showing him he'd revealed himself and telling him to stay out of my life and leave me alone. That was 10 days ago, and I've heard nothing since. It is devastating when these contacts are made. They set me back, and I worry that he will never truly be gone, and I do miss him still, as it was amazing right up until I found out about his other women. I had a lucky escape, I know, and it's taking a lot of strength to pick myself up and move forward. I had already been through so much grief after losing my lovely husband. Luckily, I know that not all men are like my sociopath, because I was with a good man for 17 years. Distance and time and no contact definitely helps with the healing. Good luck to everyone who's had a similar experience. I will be much more cautious in future.